Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. I hope that you're all doing well. Thank you so much for coming back. All my returning subscribers, I always appreciate you guys, and welcome to all my new subscribers. Thank you so much for subscribing. Welcome to the family. As you can see, we're in a bit of a different environment today. It's nature, it's so beautiful, the birds, the trees, the flowers, everything. It's really beautiful. So don't get used to it though, because I'm sure next video we're going back to our old settings. So yeah, but anyway, let's go straight to our message for today, and it is from 2 Kings 4 1 to 7, chapter 4 verse 1 to 7. Some of you might already know the story. Is the story of the widow and Elisha, right? So let me just read the story. Yeah. So it goes like this. A certain woman of the wives of the sons of the prophets cried out to Elisha, saying, "Your servant, my husband, is dead. And you know that your servant feared the Lord, and the creditor is coming to take my 2 sons to be his slaves." So Elisha said to her, "What shall I do for you? Tell me, what do you have in the house?" And she said, "Your maidservant has nothing in the house but a jar of oil." Then he said, "Go, borrow vessels from everywhere and from all your neighbors, empty vessels. Do not gather just a few. And when you have come in, you shall shut the door behind you and your sons. Then pour it into all those vessels and set aside the full ones." So she went from him and shut the door behind her and her sons, who brought the vessels to her, and she poured it out. Now it came to pass, when the vessels were full, that she said to her son, "Bring me another vessel." And he said to her, "There is not another vessel." So the oil ceased. Then she came and told the man of God, and he said, "Go, sell the oil and pay your debt, and you and your sons live on the rest." So in those days, when you owed somebody, and like in this case, the lady's husband, the widow's husband, died, and so that meant that her sons were supposed to be given into slavery in order for them to pay the debt that their dad had left unpaid, because of his death. And so this widow is quite desperate, right, at the time when Elisha comes to her. So there are so many lessons. I mean, it's just 7 verses, but it is packed with lessons that we can learn. So let us just look at some of the lessons that we can learn from this story. So the first thing is that Elisha asked her what she has, right? What do you have? Because the thing is, we all have something that we can offer, right? We all have gifts, we all have, it could be gifts, it could be talents, it could be resources, it could be time. We all have something that we can offer somebody. So he's asking her, "What do you have?" Now, what does the widow say? She says, "I don't have anything. Your maidservant has nothing in the house." And then, but a jar of oil. So it looks like, she doesn't think, she doesn't recognize that jar of oil is of much importance, is of much significance. "I have nothing at home. The only thing I have in the house is a jar of oil." But little did she know that it was this jar of oil that was going to be the source of her miracle, the source of, the much needed change that was needed, in her life, the source of the change that was needed in her life, right? So we have to recognize that we do have something, because sometimes, you look at yourself and you just believe that what you have is not enough. You think that, that whatever resources you have are not enough to achieve that which God is asking you to achieve, to do. But Elisha is going to prove to us that what we do have is actually more than enough for God to be able to multiply, right? And sometimes we are not even able to recognize the things that we do have, right? Sometimes we need other people to help us recognize those things in us, those talents in us. Sometimes, it could be something that you had completely forgotten about, concerning yourself because of the circumstances of life, and then you need somebody to come into your life and remind you of those gifts and of those talents and of those resources that God had given you for you to be able to multiply and make something, good or better out of your life, right? And so after that, also, some of those people in our lives, it could be your parents, it could be your friends, it could be your spiritual leaders, it could be mentors, it could be coaches, whoever. And sometimes, as well, you could be that person, right, in another person's life that will help them recognize that they do have something to offer. Now, Elisha says, ask your neighbors for jars. Ask your neighbors for jars. No man is an island, right? We need people. We need people to help us. We need people to help, build our talents. We need people to help us move from point A to point B. And we can also be those people that would help somebody to move from point A to point B. But then sometimes pride would, stop us from asking for help, because you don't want to be that person, that goes and humbles themselves to ask for help, right? I can identify with this, not because of pride in my case, but it's just because of the fear of being an inconvenience to people. I never like to feel like I'm inconveniencing anybody. So because of that, a lot of times I do not ask for help. And that is not the best way to live, right? Because sometimes you're blocking your blessings because you're keeping your mouth shut, right? And so in this case, he tells her, go and ask your neighbors for jars. So we have to keep pride aside sometimes. We have to, keep remove that fear of, being an inconvenience, sometimes, and open our mouths and ask for help, right? And so, because the widow could have been proud, she could have been like, oh my goodness, I don't want to ask my neighbors for anything, What if my neighbors say no? What if my neighbors think, less of me? I don't want to do that. But then she went ahead and she did it. And so the neighbors, on the other hand as well, they could have refused to, to offer her the jars that she needed, right? So it's two-sided. She could have refused to go, or she could have went, and then the neighbors could have said, I don't want to help this woman. So we need to be that person that is humble enough to ask for help. Or if it's not pride that is stopping you from asking for help, just remove that blockage, whatever it is, if it's fear of being an inconvenience or whatever it is, and open your mouth and ask for help. And then we could also be that neighbor that offers the help that somebody is asking for in their time of need. So the neighbors gave the widow the jars that she was asking for, and that helped in making her miracle possible, right? So God will put divine helpers in our lives. He would put people in our lives that will help us to move from that one point to the other. And sometimes we're going to be those people that God is going to put in the lives of others to help them move from one point to the other. So we should be sensitive to know which phase we're in. Now, there's a fact here, which is that she had a debt to pay. If there were no debt, there would be no story. We wouldn't know about this widow. So there was a tragedy in her life. There was an obstacle in her life. There was something negative happening in her life. Sometimes we need to get to our wit's end in order to be able to discover what is deep inside of us, what our purpose is. Because sometimes when life is all rosy, a lot of times things that were supposed to lead us to greater heights just stay there buried because we are in our comfort zones. We're good, life is good, life is rosy, just like the beautiful tree behind me. Life is all good. But then sometimes, life gets really hard, everywhere is dry. There is no greenery, right? And so because of that, because we've gotten to the end of the line. It's almost like we are desperate, and that is when we're able to dig deep inside of us, to find that thing that might have been lying there dormant, or we remember an idea, or whatever it is, right? And so Elisha was used by God. He brought Elisha to this woman's life at the right time, at the perfect time. Think about it. Maybe if Elisha had come to this woman at a time when she wasn't in need, she probably would not have listened to him. She probably would not have, followed the instructions that he was giving her. But because, he came to her at her moment of desperation, she did every single thing that he was asking her to do, and that led to the miracle that we are talking about today, right? And so it's like her desperation made her willing to obey. Her desperation made her willing to follow instructions. Have you ever been in a situation where somebody is giving you advice, people have given you advice about something, but you don't listen, right? But then when you've gotten to your lowest point, you start remembering the advice that people had been giving you. You start remembering all the things that people had been telling you that you were not willing to listen to because you were in a very good place in your life. Or you start being willing to listen to counsel because you are on the ground, you are at your lowest. So that is kind of the situation. So sometimes God might actually allow for us to get to our lowest point so that we'll be able to listen, we'll be able to hear his voice better, we'll be able to listen to the instructions of people better, and that would actually lead us to a better place. That would actually lead us to our purpose. Because when we are when everything is all good, is all rosy, sometimes our ears are kind of blocked. They are blocked because things are going well, and so I can't hear you. My life is good, so I can't hear you. There's nothing you can tell me. But sometimes God will allow for you to go through that desert in order for your ears to be unblocked, in order for your heart to be unblocked, in order for your eyes to be open, to see better, right? And the other thing that we learn from this story is that time and patience are needed. Time and patience. Now, when Elisha tells her, to pour the oil, right? She goes and then, she gets the jars of oil, and then she comes and so she starts pouring from her flask into the containers. It's not just one container. It is several containers, several jars, because he told her, get as many jars as possible. Do not, just get as many jars as possible. So it wasn't a 1 minute thing, right? Time was needed, patience was needed, even strength was needed, for her to be able to do the thing that she needed to do. She could have gotten tired and she could have said, you know what, I've had enough, I've poured enough, I have enough of what I need, I'm not going to do that anymore. But she kept going. So it's the lack of empty jars that caused the oil flow to stop, and not the other way around. She did not stop. She did not decide, you know what, I'm going to stop at this point. No, she kept going. As long as there were empty jars, the oil kept flowing, right? So this means that we need to keep working. We need to keep working on nourishing, and filling our tanks, and also filling the tanks of the other people that God has put in our lives. We need to work on nourishing ourselves, on filling our tanks, whether it be with the word of God, whether it be working on our talents. As long as there's availability, as long as we have the strength, we have the health, we have the breath to do all of those things, we need to keep going, because there is a mission at hand. There is work to be done, right? And now the other thing that Elisha asked her to do was, he said, close the door behind you. He asked her to close the door behind her before she started pouring the oil into the different containers, into the different jars. And this came, he was doing this according to a law that was in Deuteronomy 24:10-11, whereby a creditor, if somebody owed you money, they did not have the right to come into your house to get the money. They had to stand outside and wait for you to bring, the money to them, or whatever it is that you were owing them. They did not have any right to come into your house, right? So it says here in Deuteronomy 24:10-11. I'm reading, all of this is from the New King James Version. When you lend your brother anything, you shall not go into his house to get his pledge. You shall stand outside, and the man to whom you lend shall bring the pledge out to you. So Elisha was doing this to protect the woman, to protect the widow, because while she was pouring, no creditor could come into her house, right? So she was safe within the comfort of her house. Now, what can that also mean? There's a time, for everything, right? There's a time for everything. So she could pour uninterrupted. So there are times when we need to be alone. We need to close our doors and spend time in God's presence, working on the things that He has asked us to work on without getting interrupted, right? So closing your door, sometimes means just spending that time alone, working in silence on the things that God has asked you to work on, because there is a time when those things are going to, get revealed. And in this case, it was, obviously her pouring, and then she would eventually have to go out and then sell the oil and then get the money that she'll be able to give to the creditors, right? So you need to have that time where you focus, where you shut everything, out, and you just spend that time in God's presence. You just spend that time working on your project. You just spend that time studying. You just spend that time, trying to get better. You just spend that time taking courses, like growing as a professional, growing as an individual, growing, in different aspects of your life. Sometimes you need that, uninterrupted time. And then when the time is right, you can then go out there and show whatever it is that you have been working on in silence, right? So that is something, that's a very important lesson that we learn from this, widow, closing the door, or Elisha encouraging her to close the door in order to be able to pour without interruption. And then obviously, after all of this is said and done, she sells the oil and she's able to, pay back everything that she owed. And there's another thing that I see here, which is responsibility. Have you ever seen a situation where somebody is owing money, right? But then they get some money, instead of paying that money back, they use up the money, right? Or maybe you need to pay your house rent, and then somebody blesses you with some amount of money, and instead of using it to pay your rent, or do whatever it is that you need to do, you spend the money recklessly, and then you're back to square one. This widow did not do that. She used the money that she made to do what she needed to do, which was pay back the debt, right? So this is another lesson that we should learn. Be responsible with your money. Be responsible with your commitment, right? So if you have a commitment to pay something, to pay somebody's money that you owe, please pay back the money. If you have that money, use money that is meant, to do thing A, to do thing A. Money that is meant for thing B, use it for thing B. Don't, use money irresponsibly. Don't spend money irresponsibly, right? Instead of paying your house rent, you go and you buy clothes, for example. Instead of paying a debt that you owe, you go and you buy shoes, for example. That is not what this widow is teaching us. So let us be wise, let us be responsible in the way that we use our resources. And the last thing, to conclude, if you've watched my video on talent, I'm going to link it somewhere here. It's almost the same message, the same conclusion, which is that we have a debt to pay because we were bought at a price, right? In the parable of the talents, we have the master who goes and he says he's coming back, right? So just like this widow had a debt to pay, and she had to, do she had to take the necessary steps, you know, to make sure that this debt was paid. We also have responsibilities. We also have things that we need to do while we're here on earth, you know, to do, you know, to do the things that God has called us to do, with the talents that he has given us, with the time that he has given us, with the resources that he has given us. So let's make sure that while we're here on earth, we use our time responsibly, we use our time judiciously, and that we dig deep within ourselves to know what our purpose is, what the thing is that he wants us to do. So that just like the widow, you know, when we're asked, what do you have? I have nothing except for, you know, name that idea. God is going to put that in your mind. He's going to bring it to your remembrance, so that you can realize that that jar of oil that you have is all you really need to be able to do what God wants you to do. That jar of oil could be the source of blessing to yourself and to those around you. That jar of oil that you have, which you thought was nothing, which you thought was insignificant, is actually that thing that is going to cause you to prosper, that is going to cause you, you know, to bless others, that is going to cause you to bring others to Christ, that is going to cause you to be, you know, to be a blessing, that is going to cause you to be able to fulfill your purpose. That jar of oil, do not minimize it. Do not minimize it. So my challenge for us this evening or today is, find that jar of oil. What is that? What is your jar of oil? What is that idea? What is that little talent, or that you think is little? What is, you know, that resource that you think is little? What is that thing that you had put in your journal a long time ago, which you thought, you know, you could which you thought was insignificant? What is that dream inside of you that you have decided to bury, but because you think it is not something that could, you know, amount to anything? What is your jar of oil? Think about it, pray about it, and do something about it. God is going to help you, because it's God that gave you that jar of oil so that you can use it for his glory. Amen. All right, guys, that is the end of my message. I pray that it blessed you. Please consider sharing, subscribe if you haven't subscribed, and yeah, like, you know, and yeah, comment, share with me, you know, your thoughts, and yeah, I will see you in my next video, God willing. All right, guys, God bless you.